Welcome to another edition of Spits and Suds. So great you can join us. I'm Gavin Spittle of 105.3 The Fan. Thank you so much for listening and, as always, supporting Spits and Suds. Got a good one for you today as we talk Stars in the NHL with the host of Locked On Stars. He is also the play-by-play announcer for the Corpus Christi Ice Rays in the NAHL. If you're wondering what the NAHL is, it's a terrific league where a lot of these kids, it's a junior league, a lot of these kids go on to college. There's been NHLers. In fact, Connor Hellebuck is one of those former players. Ben Bishop is another one that played in the NAHL. He is with the Corpus Christi Ice Rays as well. It's Joey Erickson. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be on with you once again. Every time we get together, it seems to be good stuff. So excited to be here. Appreciate you having me on again and ready to chop it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And quickly, the Corpus Christi Ice Rays are going to have a series, kind of a home and away against the Lone Star Brahmas coming up. So next week, it'll be a cool, nice tilt in as kind of like the back and forth as far as who's going to be in the top of the division in the NAHL between Lone Star playing out of North Richland Hills and Corpus Christi.
Yeah, these are going to be massive games for us. On the bright side for Corpus Christi, it's been 5 or 6 years since they've been back into playoff contention, and they've had such a great season. I'm just happy I brought some luck down here to the
Of course,
to the
it's all you.
Bend.
It's all the play-by-play guy.
I guess so. Yeah, and they're playing so great. And these two teams just they despise each other, Gavin. It actually is a lot of fun because there is some of that animosity.
Yeah.
So if anybody can make it out to North Richland Hills, the NYTEX Sports Center next weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you get a 3-game weekend. You come say hi to me. I'm pretty much right in the middle of the stands when I'm doing the game.
Oh, nice.
And enjoy some hockey. It really is good, as you mentioned. Like, there's a lot of good talent. It's young, and it can be fun. And I promise you, there'll probably be some fireworks.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Last night in the NHL, Winnipeg with a big overtime win in Colorado, 3-2. And I wanted to start with Winnipeg because I've talked in circles with people in Winnipeg, and they said, well, I don't really believe in Winnipeg. And I understand the first round exit last year, Joey, but at the same time, a plus 50 goal differential. You have clearly the Vezina leader and Hart Trophy candidate in Connor Hellebuck in net with a 2.02 goals against and a 927 save percentage. They are 32% on the power play, which is tops in the NHL, and they're about mid-pack as far as penalty kill. So if there is a way to get to Winnipeg, it's put them in the box. They're 14th in the NHL, which is not bad, but not among the league's best. So it's just fascinating because I understand what people are saying based on recent playoff years, but with a new coach and a new system, I personally want to stay away from Winnipeg and wanted to get your thoughts because I'm actually a believer.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation because if you asked me last year, I was not a big fan of Winnipeg and was not worried at all if the Stars had run into them. But I tend to agree with your viewpoint from this season. I think they could be really dangerous, especially with the depth scoring they're getting. And Kyle Connor is such an elite scorer at the NHL level. He's a lot of fun to watch. And yeah, when you have Hellebuck on your as your safety net, it's really hard. It is really hard to take down Winnipeg. I think it's a bit different. They're big, they're heavy, they're physical. They sort of give me a nightmare matchup if you're the Stars. Like, that's the type of team that I think the Stars can really struggle against, on top of just having the best goaltender in the NHL. So I tend to be on your viewpoint as well, where I'm believing in Winnipeg a bit more this season than I would have in years past. And yeah, when you have a power play that's rolling, and I think just the overall approach and system, the way they go about business is a lot different than years past. And a plus 50 goal differential is no joke.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one is Minnesota. And Minnesota's getting some great goaltending, and they're sticking around too. So, the Central, as far as 2 and 3, with Dallas and Colorado is going to be in the mix as well. This is kind of fascinating, and all 4 teams are playing at a very high level. Then you have Utah looking on the outside, but Utah beat Winnipeg the other night, so Utah has had some injuries, but there's a lot of talent on that Utah squad as well. The Central is very tough.
Yeah, Minnesota's interesting, and they've done a great job of just sort of staying afloat with all the injuries. I mean, you can go
Amazing.
down a list.
And cap
Spurgeon,
issues.
yeah, and cap issues from years past. Brodeen, I just saw that Kaprizov was activated from the IR, so he's coming back. So you imagine they can really only get better with the bodies that are going to return. I like the Stars' chances against Minnesota just based off recency and recent playoff success against Minnesota. Colorado's a scary team too because they're sort of like Minnesota where they've dealt with so many injuries. Jared Bednar's done such a great job there, and obviously they have McKinnon and McCarr that can certainly help you stay afloat. But they're going to start humming here in the second half of the season. And I mean, you just look at like a team like Utah or even St. Louis, like they're just a couple points out of it. So there's going to be some teams that are going to be hanging around, sniffing for a wild card spot, just trying to get in, which I'm looking forward to see how that sort of affects the trade deadline with the Four Nations face off and all that. I'm just curious to see how it all plays out in February, where finally teams either agree, like, okay, like we're going for it, or it's time to sell off some pieces.
So, Spitting Chicklets podcast, which is terrific. Absolutely love those guys. They are wonderful at what they do, and I'm glad that they are so successful because I think it brings all of us podcasters up. I mean, Joey's on Locked On Stars. We're here on Spits and Suds. We share information. I mean, to me, it's like, let's all grow together. And Spitting Chicklets is kind of the example that we would all love to be. I mean, they're absolutely wonderful. But they did talk about what has been going around in Chicago circles regarding Seth Jones possibly being on the block and the possibility of Chicago making that trade possibility even tastier by picking up $4 to $5 million of the salary for the next 4 years. And that's a lot to take on. But it is interesting. There is a massive hometown tie. He lives here in the off season. This is where he trains. And I started thinking about it, and I'm interested. I think that I would love to see Seth Jones on a Cup contending team and see what kind of different Seth Jones we would see. I am, understandably so, a little bit worried about injury. However, I think he makes your blue line a lot better.
I am too, because I just feel like there's a lot to work with with Seth Jones. And as you alluded to, you bring him in to an environment that is made suitable to who he is right now as a 30-year-old defenseman. There just is a lot there at 6'4", 214 pounds, and someone that has experience at the NHL level that I think could be really, really valuable on the Dallas Stars. And I actually discussed this on an episode of Locked On Stars a few days ago, just mentioning my thoughts and observations on him. Obviously, 9.5 is just not going to work here in Dallas. There would have to be some way to retain some of his cap. And I know some of his advanced numbers aren't that great, but at the same time, he's played in Chicago recently and he's played in Columbus. Those are not teams that are have been filled with talent over recent years, or at least elite level teams. So I think it would be really cool to have Seth Jones. And sort of work him in here. I mean, he's a right shot defenseman.
Yes.
Maybe it's a sort of reclamation project that may be scary to some Stars fans because you feel like you're doing that with Matt Dumba right now, and some others. But I think Seth Jones is a good player, and if you could get him here in Dallas, I think he can make a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would not be asking Seth Jones to necessarily hop ahead of Harley and Heiskanen. I could easily see him in a second pairing, and the guy
Yeah.
kills penalties as well, and he also plays on the power play. So there's a lot of versatility there. And I mean, just think about it. You have, let's just say you go Heiskanen and Harley on the first pairing. I've always thought Heiskanen should be back with Lindell,
Yeah.
so that I would like to free up Miro a little bit offensively to see if it's there, because offensively it's just not happening this year. But if you did go Heiskanen, Harley, and then you went Lindell, Seth Jones, and then all of a sudden your third pairing is Lyubushkin and Lundqvist. Yeah, I mean that's not bad at all. So
Yeah, I would feel so much more comfortable with that six
yeah, or you go
than what they're
Lyubushkin,
curling,
Bishop.
rolling out there.
Yeah.
And I've sort of gotten into this recently, Gavin, too, where it's like, well, this is the best the Stars have right now. Like, this is the best they're throwing out there. And that Tuesday game against Carolina, I feel like sort of exposed some of the issues with Dallas. And that's one of my big takeaways right now is, well, this is the best the Stars have to offer. And I don't believe it's good enough to make a deep run in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They're going to have to make some additions, and it's probably not even one. They probably need two to really shore up the back end just to have some more stability back there, because
Yes.
what they're trotting out there right now is it's just not good enough against teams that you want to compete against, and those are the Carolinas of the world. And you mentioned the Winnipegs earlier. Like, those are going to be tough teams that you have to have more stability back there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris Tanev provided it last year. The other thing that I talked about on the post game the other day with David Castillo is just the versatility of this team. And this is one of my concerns. As the rink gets tighter, as we make our way toward the playoffs, physicality certainly gets ramped up. I think the depth of this team is impressive, but at the same time, I would love to see versatility, whereas the other night against Carolina is, to me, the perfect example. It's not going well. Your speed has been neutralized. You're trying everything to get into their zone. You're dumping pucks in the zone. That's, to me, when you ramp up your checking, you ramp up your forechecking, and you try different things, saying, you know what, the stretch passes aren't working. Carolina's big on the neutral zone. You know, we have got to establish a different game, and you change it up a little bit. The first few shifts of that third period, I actually thought they did that, but then kind of went back into a mode. And I'm watching that game, Joey, and I just said to myself, even when they scored, I said, boy, I would gladly take a point out of this.
Yes.
Because I felt as though Carolina was going to score another goal, and I just never felt as though the Stars could take 2 points out of that game, and that's a concern.
Yeah, and it's tough when you feel like they only can win one certain way. And you mentioned the versatility. Like, can Dallas adapt within games? Because they've struggled to win games with special teams. Well, specifically the power play, right? Especially on home ice. They go 0 for 3 the other night. And they struggle to win those heavy physical contests too, because, as you mentioned, I just don't think they have enough of the personnel to do that. Because I was thinking about this too a few weeks ago when I was watching the Red Wings Avalanche over the weekend. Don't you just feel like you're watching the same like 6 to 8 players with Dallas sometimes? And it's not a knock on players like Ritskovian or Blumel or Stankoven or even Bork, but you're watching similar guys, the same stature and the same skill set. And it just feels like Dallas has it feels like they have 6 or 7 of those same type of forwards, and they just need something else. They need a Mason Marchment type force. They need somebody that brings a different skill set. And it's not that they can't be successful with that. It's not like even those guys are not contributing. Like, Stankoven's a wonderful 200-foot player. Ritskovian has had some great impact. I've loved what Blumel has brought to the Stars here over the past week, but I'm still watching sort of the same similar skill set from each of these forwards, and they need something different because, as you mentioned, they need some more versatility. When they can't have that open sort of flowy game, they have to, kind of go to the well, so to speak, and grind it out. And of course, it hurts not having Marchment, right? But even with Marchment and Sagan, they're still pretty similar. So I'm right there with you. They have to be able to adapt and win in more ways because as if you look at that game like Carolina, I think you're right. Where it's just like I really don't see them coming out of here with 2 points. And that's with a Carolina team that played the night before.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saw the lack of checking from both teams. It was almost like they were just going through the motions. You didn't really see any like nastiness. There truly wasn't a lot of in front play of these goaltenders.
No.
Both played well, but both had clean looks. So, and then I watch the highlights and I see Ilya Shesterkin going after Brady Tkachuk. And,
yeah, exactly.
And I'm saying,
when is Otter going to take a piece of somebody?
it's old school, but a lot of times it works. And you have to do it right. But an agitator certainly can make a difference in those games where the team needs a certain lift. It gets the crowd into the game. There's just so many aspects that a big check can do or something. I mean, that crowd, and I'm not saying anything against the AAC because it's a rocking barn, but that was a silent night at the AAC. That happens. It's an 82-game schedule. But I will say, on this front, this is one of the reasons I want the recall of Liam Bichsel, not necessarily for the fighting, not necessarily for the checking, but to me, he creates space on the ice. And you made a great thought just now where you said you look at all these players and they look the same. There's something about Bichsel on the ice, and clearly it's his size, but also his
yes.
puck moving ability. Like, that's what I was really impressed at. And he's not just there to fight, because he was offered many times and you saw he didn't want to drop the gloves. So I love his head. And I just felt as though as the games went on, Pete DeBoer said it himself, the Chicago game was probably his best game. Then he went down. So at some point I am expecting a recall.
Yeah, me too. I just believe he's one of the 6 best defensemen right now for Dallas. And I don't know how you could just let him simmer there for that long without bringing him up, because I think he could be a valuable piece in the postseason. Whether that means he plays a lot, I don't know. I don't think he's going to be logging 20 minutes a night for the Stars, but I think there still are some questions about Nils Lundkvist, right? Like he's made some great strides this season, but when it comes to April and hopefully into June, what is that going to look like? Are we going to get 5 to 7 minutes a night, Nils Lundkvist, or can we bump it up to around 12 to 15? Or would they rather be more comfortable with like an Alex Petrovic, right? Like that's always an option too. But I'm right there with you. It's funny you mentioned the size, because my dad went to a game a few months ago, and I asked him, I said, what does Bichsel look like? I believe it was against Washington. He said, a moose among deer. He's just big, and he's large, and he moves so well.
Yeah.
I think he's really fleet-footed, and I think he can only get better. I think he can only get better with time. And maybe he's not going to be a massive impact for Dallas in the postseason, but I feel like if you bring him up, sort of like Harley did a few years ago, the last 15 to 20 games, get him involved again, get him ready, and see what you have. And I think it tells a lot too, Gavin. You mentioned Pete DeBoer giving him some praise. Remember last season when Tanev was hurt in that Western Conference final? Like, there was a real case if Tanev could not go, Bichsel was going to play. they were going to have Bichsel just throw in a rookie over like Nils Lundkvist. So they obviously trust him, I think, quite a bit. And I wouldn't be surprised if he is recalled soon, as you mentioned.
So when you look at trade targets, are you thinking to yourself splash, or are you thinking to yourself short term? Because I did bring up with Sean Shapiro last Friday, and I don't mean this. Like, obviously, we all want the Stars to do well because we do Stars specifics podcasts. But to me, there is a point, and we were talking about Jamie Benn, and Captain's been great this year. Awesome in the face-off circle. He's been really good. But at some point, do you have to change the dynamic of this team to take that next step? And we're looking ahead to the playoffs. I mean, for all we know, they could go on an epic run. But that is in the back of my mind. If for some reason you get knocked out this year, that's 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
What is that extra piece? And I did bring up with Sean, and Sean said, I understand what you're saying. He goes, I think this team can win a cup. But I talked about the Calgary-Florida trade, which clearly took Florida to a new level. And Calgary got really, really nice pieces. I mean, if you look at the success of Calgary this year, Jonathan Huberdeau is a big part of it, along with some really good goaltending. So Calgary's in the mix. So I just thought that was, kind of interesting. Wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, man, because it really it's hard, and I imagine General Manager Jim Nill has the toughest job. I do not envy him because he does have so much talent that when you look at it, you're like, man, this window is just opening, right, for Dallas. Like there could be 4 or 5 years where they're right in the mix, but it comes to the point, right? You mentioned like if you get bounced, that's like 3 years in a row. At some point, are you gonna take a big swing? Because it feels like the teams that do take those big swings get rewarded. And you mentioned Florida here over the last few years, 2 trips to the Stanley Cup final, and then they get to lift the trophy last season. Are you okay with maybe having to give up on a Maverick Bourque or having to give him away in order to get that X factor, that piece that can lift you over the hump? I'll say it. I am there right now. I feel like with the Stars, and I was sort of milling about this recently. Like let's go for it. Right, this is a season where even the West for the Winnipegs of the world in Vegas, like they're really good teams. I think if you can go out there and make sort of a splash, and JT Miller's out there. I'm not saying Dallas should go after him, but that's the type of player I think Dallas needs to sort of have their eye on. A scoring center iceman / wing point per game guy. You may have to mortgage some of your future, but it's about right now, and that's what it's always about. Can you get the job done? I'm interested in long term. I know Brock Nelson's been thrown out there, and he's a UFA. I guess it just kind of depends on who I would be willing to give up based off term and based off how many years and all that good stuff and money. But I'm hoping that you go out there and make a splash. And as you mentioned, you need a change. You need a dynamic change to the roster up front to get them over the hump, because I don't think the roster right now that Dallas has is going to be capable of doing a ton of damage in the postseason. Do I think they can win a series? Yeah, but man, I don't know if they can get through a gauntlet like they had to go through last year. So let's make a splash. Let's go for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you look, and it's going to be another gauntlet. I mean, there's
exactly.
Even if you end up a wild card team, or even if you end up in the top 3. If you're in the top 3, it's like, wow, you're going to play Winnipeg, Colorado, or Minnesota in the first round. That's not easy. I mean, you've had playoff success against Minnesota, but if you watch this Wild team, it's different than in past years. So, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's just, and this is kind of like why I'm interested to watch Friday night as well, because now you have another Cup contender. So it's 2 in a row. Yeah. And let's see how they come out on Friday night against Vegas. Saturday is not going to be easy because St. Louis is much better than a lot of people thought they would be, as Doug Armstrong continues to build that team and new coach Jim Montgomery. So there's always going to be a little extra sauce from the coaching staff to get 2 points in Dallas. But at the same time, Vegas is interesting because Vegas to me is one of those teams that can be physical. Vegas, you put them on the power play and it's like, oh boy, here we go. Even though the Stars are the number 1 kill team in the NHL. So interested to see Friday night.
Yeah, I'm curious too. When does Jim Nill grow impatient, right?
Yes.
Vegas is a team that seems like they're always impatient, right? I mean, they are going for it. They are going out, they're grabbing whoever they can from every walk of life to bring into their organization. And when does Jim Nill get to the point where, like, all right, I've had enough. It's nice that we're sort of playing it safe, and we've brought in all this young talent via drafting and our hard works of our scouts, but now it's time to to really go after it. And yes, Friday's going to be another one of those sort of measuring stick games, because it's sort of what I took out of the Monday contest against Carolina. Just feel like Dallas is far away right now, and they have to find a way to get to that class. In Vegas, you mentioned every time they go to the power play, I feel like I get tightened up. I get worried knowing that Jack Eichel is going to be out there and making things happen. So, yeah, this will be another great test for Dallas. I will say this, for all the negatives I feel like we've talked about with Dallas here in this podcast. The Stars usually respond. They usually respond well, and they have some pride. And I'm looking forward to watching them take on a very, very good Vegas team, and it should be a good one. There's obviously some recent history there. It's going to be on ESPN, so it's a national TV game, and hopefully the good guys come out on the right side of the result.
Yeah, one of the things that Jim Nill told Sean Shapiro is the parity in the NHL is making it tough. And just a quick glance, if we're looking to make a trade in the West, Chicago could be a trade partner. San Jose could be a partner. Nashville's a little tough because they're in your own division, but could be a partner. Anaheim could be a partner. They've already made some trades. Seattle is a potential partner, but after that, there's still a lot of potential as far as wild card. You could even see like a Utah add some pieces.
Yeah.
And then you look at the East. Detroit's been really good lately. You really have the Islanders and Buffalo. I mean, maybe if it's the right deal for Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, but the bottom line is there aren't as many teams out of it, and Jim Nill says that because of that, the asking price is that much higher. So I think
exactly.
That's where the patience is, and we've talked about it on Spits and Suds with Four Nations. It's very tough to make a trade, let's say, for a Brock Nelson. He plays for Team USA. He goes down. He's now out for 4 to 6 weeks. Well, you traded some pretty good assets to get him, and you need him. So that's, I think, the other thing, because these guys are going to go, it's not like an all-star game. These guys, to me, are going to go hard to play for their country.
Yeah, I that's why I believe too. It's probably going to be a frenzy post Four Nations face off, where teams,
yes,
and and we got a couple more weeks here. Maybe some maybe some teams slip, and then they have to have the come to Jesus moment where, like, okay, maybe we're not where we need to be. So I think, yeah, you're right. The patience is going to have to come post that tournament before teams are willing to either admit that they're not going for a run, and then the asking price comes down. But that's a great point. Especially with teams in the mix. I mean, you look at the East, right? I feel like there's 8 to 10 teams that within like 5 points of the second wild card. So
yeah,
there's a lot in there. Pittsburgh's interesting because I know Pettersson's sort of been thrown out there. Their rear guard, who I think I looked at in the offseason a bit. And I think he would be. He's a left shot, but he's $4 million cap hit at in his 5th year. I'm at 28 years of age, so like that could be a potential add for Dallas too. 6'4", some big size. So yeah, Pittsburgh, I would keep my eye on too. But yeah, it's just such a logjam right now of teams that are gonna be in the mix. And yeah, I think the Four Nations face-off is going to be exciting too. I can't wait for that. So I'm intrigued for the whole thing, and then what's going to happen. Postpone that.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Excited in the next few weeks for Four Nations. And if you want to check out some great hockey, Joey will be on the play-by-play for the Corpus Christi Ice Rays as they take on our very own Brahmas next week. Mm-hmm. And if you have not watched NHL hockey, NAHL hockey, it's in North Richland Hills. It's a terrific brand. It's hard-hitting. It's physical. The Brahmas certainly have that style. And, yeah, it's going to be a good one as they fight for position. So there's that, and also the terrific podcast that Joey does, Locked on Stars, where he talks Stars daily. It's called Locked on Stars. I've been on the program, and it's wonderful. So make sure you add that to your podcast list. Joey the Jet, you're always great, man. Great to have you on.
Well, appreciate the tire pump there at the end. Love jumping on with you. Thank you so much as always. And I'm going to throw this up on Locked On Stars too,
Great.
so some of our listeners can get a taste of what we're cooking up here. Spits and Suds is so great, and thank you for what you do and all the guys you bring on to, and all the women and men you bring
Yeah.
on to
Thank you.
give them some light. And I know Stars fans are very appreciative. I am, of course, for what you've done for me and my little career too. I love you guys at the Fan, and appreciate you again. Have a great day, man, and
Yeah.
look
All
forward
right.
to catching
Just
up again.
just a real quickie because I thought of this. So
Yeah.
you're seeing more and more play-by-play announcers and their passion as far as, because now, pull back the curtain, they work for the team. So
Yes.
when it gets ugly, obviously the play-by-play announcers show emotion. Well, in the NAHL, a lot of times there's not much space between the announcer booths. So the question I have for you is, has it ever gotten ugly as far as play-by-play between you and another announcer?
No, fortunately, I have not ran into that dilemma over my past few seasons in the North American Hockey League, which is great. Most of the play-by-play guys, I mean, 98% of these guys are absolute beauties, and we keep it very, very civil.
That doesn't
And
make for a
I
good
haven't had
spits
any
and
run-ins.
stories.
I think it's just the teams you got to worry about between those guys. So that's good. I don't have to worry about any of my peers, fortunately.
Well, you'll get terminated, but you can at least come on this podcast and tell a great story.
Yeah, I
If that
guess
does come
I
to
guess so. Maybe
fruition.
I could do it for the viral moment, right, Gavin? No, they're awesome, which is good. And in the South too, there's multiple guys from North Texas, including myself, which is great to see. There's
Nice.
one New Mexico, Jason Thomas, who's awesome, and then David in Oklahoma. They all came from North Texas. I know one went to UNT, one went to Oklahoma, so that's really awesome too to see some guys, similar backgrounds like myself that don't come from, prototypical hockey markets that are making their way in the broadcasting business, especially in hockey. So it's awesome.
Have you played the Maine Nordiques yet?
We have not. The only time we would get a chance to play them would have been
Okay.
in the North American Hockey League showcase at the beginning of the season. The team I was with last year, we did end up playing Maine, actually.
Nice. So what's the coolest road trip you've been on this year?
Coolest road trip. It's a great question. I really liked Colorado. So there's a team in Greeley, Colorado. It's about an hour north of Denver. And here's a great story for you. I don't want to put our our bus on blast, but we didn't have heat. So you can imagine Colorado. This was still in November, so it wasn't too bad, but it was sort of the first, frost and freeze was coming in, and it was about 50 degrees on our bus for an 8-hour drive from Amarillo to Greeley, Colorado. I can't believe I didn't lose a couple of toes because I was freezing trying to stay bundled up on the bus for 8.5. I think the trip probably ended up lasting 10 hours, but I loved Greeley. I thought the building was great. The atmosphere was really good. And I enjoyed that. So it's probably my favorite of the
great.
year. But I like Lone Star too, just because I get to go back home.
Absolutely.
I get to see my family
Yeah,
and stuff.
absolutely. Can't wait to see the tilt next weekend. It's going to be a good one. Thank you so much again, Joey Erickson from Locked On Stars. And that'll do it for another episode of Spits and Suds. Sean Shapiro scheduled to join us tomorrow. And then, of course, we'll be back for the postgame tomorrow night against Vegas. A very, very nice tilt. And we'll have that for you right here on Spits and Suds on 105.3 The Fan. Have a great day, everyone.